Alright, so here we have 3 Mortal Kombat 1 soundboards, and I purchased these as a lot of all 3 together. All of them were advertised as not working. So upon initial inspection, I've obviously done work to them since then and now, but I talked about these in that first video I made chronicling the upcoming 6 chassis repairs, which turned into 8, which might turn into 10 because I keep acquiring this stuff. But I mentioned all these real quick in the first video, and I'm finally getting around to getting to work on them. So other than looking at them as a general overview, everything was complete. They weren't missing any parts. But this one was the first one I grabbed out of the 3, and it was a bit dirty, so I went and tried to clean it as best as I could for the time being. It's still a bit dirty, but it was clean enough for testing purposes. And I fired it up and it worked perfect. There was nothing wrong with it. Full audio range, correct sounds, correct music, no issues. So I think a lot of times people hook these up incorrectly. I don't know why this was advertised as not working when it works just perfectly fine. I think a lot of times people will have their ribbon cable on backwards, either at this end or the main board. You want to make sure pin 1 and 2 correspond to pin 1 and 2 of the main board. It's easy to have this backwards at one end or the other. So I think a lot of times people have the ribbon cable on backwards or they have the sound pot unhooked. But it worked perfect with no issues. So this was good out of the gate. So 1 out of 3 without having to do anything was good. So I got a bit of a score on that one. I have 3 cap kits. Well, I have 2 left now. This one's got the cap kit already. I'll get to that in a minute. But I have 2 more. I'm going to do these later. This one I already did the partial, all the electrolytics, and I'll explain why when I get to that. I got to do all the axials still. But this one was fine. So board number 2, fired it up and it was dead. Completely, totally dead, no nothing. And it turns out the amplifier had 3 broken legs. You can kind of see one there. And there's 2 more on the other side. But that's because the heatsink standoff is kind of mangled up. And that was allowing the heatsink to move back and forth, move back and forth, move back and forth. And 3 of the legs busted off the amplifier. So it's always a good idea to check the amplifier legs before you assume it's dead. The way you really know if it works or not, if you don't hear any audio, you can touch the heatsink. After about 5 minutes, it should be warm or room temperature. If it's scalding hot, then the amplifier is shorted. If it's not warm at all, then the amplifier is open. Just like in this case, I had 3 broken legs. But normally, on normal operation, it'll be somewhat lukewarm or room temperature. So that's how you know the amplifier should be working. You can also, when it's powered on, you can run your fingers across the contacts, and that'll tell you whether or not it's working as well if you hear noise coming out of the speaker. So with that being said, after fixing that, I thought it was working because I had full volume, full audio range. I had all the correct music. I had the attract sounds. Everything was fine. But as soon as you began a game, or as soon as the attract mode got into a match, and it tried to speak the names or do sound effects, it just completely went haywire. It was playing wrong sound effects. It was playing sound effects over and over and over. You know, when instead of saying Kano wins, it would make the sound of Raiden's lightning. It was just a big giant jumbled mess. And it turns out that this ROM is for all of the music, and these ROMs are for all of the sound effects and the audio. So there's a little surface mount chip here, U1, that interfaces these audio or these sound effect ROMs with the rest of the board. And using this one as a template to know where the path should go, I actually found an open trace. You can see here, excuse the crudity of the repairs because I haven't gone through and done a professional job of cleaning them up. This is just temporary while I did all the repairs. But you can see here that the 4th one over from the bottom left, I've got a little jumper on here because the solder pad was bad. There's no continuity between that solder pad and it goes to the Yamaha chip. It goes to the pin 3, 1, 2, 3. It goes to that chip right there, and it goes to right there. That pathway was open. So after scraping the solder mask off and putting a little jumper here to the pin and soldering all together, after soldering that, boom, perfect. Now before I did that, I thought it might have been a capacitor issue, so I did a full cap kit and it didn't fix anything. So after doing all that, I was kind of stumped. So I went through and just did continuity on all the components. And after getting to the U1 chip, knowing that this chip interfaces with the sound effect ROMs, I went through pin for pin off of this one as a test, and I found that one trace was open. So after soldering that back together, this board is 100%. Full audio range, full correct sound effects, music, the whole 9 yards, just as perfect and working as this one. So that's 2 for 2. That was the problem with this one. And this one over here had the exact same problem, only it was compounded by a couple of other issues. You can see I thought maybe the same issue was going on with this one, so I changed all the electrolytic capacitors just as a precaution. But this one had 5 broken legs on the amplifier, because as you can see, the standoff is broken. And this got worked back and forth so many times it broke off 5 legs. So instead of trying to fix all those, I just grabbed one from this spare parts board I have. I have this as a parts board because you can see that this is all corroded and it's missing legs, and this is all corroded, and the whole board's corroded. So I just stole the amplifier off of this board and I put it on this one, and that worked perfectly. After that I had, again, full volume range, nice loud audio, all the correct music, but all the wrong sound effects. You'd start a game and it would play the wrong sound effects. It'd play, it ran through the entire sound effects library. You'd punch, high punch on player 2, and it'd play every sound effect in the entire game from one end to the other, all the way through. Only way to stop it is to reset the machine. So it was going even more haywire than this one was. That's why I changed all the electrolytics out, thinking it might have something to do with the caps. But it turns out there were 2 causes for this. And the reason it was slightly different from this one is because this one also had an open trace. You can see from the top right, the 5th pin over, this trace was open. And what happened was this capacitor was leaking. It leaked all over this entire area. And I had multiple open traces. There was an open trace between R99 and C15. There was an open trace between R99 and C99. There was an open trace here between the U1 and the sound effect chips. So I had to clean all that up and add some jumpers and all that stuff on the bottom side of the board for, you can see here, I had to add jumpers to make my continuity right. The rest of the board is somewhat clean. But these 2 jumpers had to be added because there were open traces. And I had to add a jumper here. This pin, the 5th pin from the top right, corresponds to the 5th pin over from the top right. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh, hey, I got a message. I'm popular. So pin 5 from the top right should correspond to pin 5 of the top right of the ROMs. And that was open. And it runs right underneath this, where the leaky capacitor was. So I put a wire through the via that runs to these chips on the back side, which I believe was right here. That's where that via is, which corresponds to right here. And it runs through the legs of the capacitor and right to the correct point on the chip. After fixing that, it got better. It wasn't fixed, but at least it wasn't playing through the entire library of sound effects. So it was getting better. After pulling out, with this leaky capacitor, I figured it might be affecting this. So I pulled this chip out, and all of the legs on this side of the chip in the socket, all of the socket, I should say, the legs on the socket, or receptacles in the socket, were all green. So I took the chip out, put some denatured alcohol down in there, and scrubbed it all out, and cleaned the legs of the chip, cleaned the sockets, and put it back in. And it was better, but again, it was playing scratchy noise. All of the sound effects were there now and present, but it was very, very scratchy. And that turned out to be a similar problem with the Yamaha chip here. The same thing that plagued this one was plaguing this one. All the contacts were dirty. So I took the Yamaha chip out, poured denatured alcohol in there, scrubbed them all down, cleaned the legs of the chip, cleaned the sockets, put the chip in and out a number of times to clean everything up, put it back in there, let it dry, turned it on, and perfect. No more issues. So this one had a problem with the amplifier legs, multiple open traces, and bad connections on the Yamaha chip and whatever U28 controls, I don't know offhand. So 2 bad sockets, bad traces, and bad legs on the amplifier. So 3 for 3. So let's get these tested just so you can see that they're working. No other reason besides just that. And I will do another same message. I didn't answer it, so it went again. But I'm going to go ahead and do a cap kit on this one and a cap kit on this one. This one's got partial. I'll do all the axials later. But yeah, they're all working now, so I wanted to chronicle that, and we'll test them all, and that'll finish it up. So let's see how they work. Alright, so here's the first board that tested fine without doing any work to it. We'll just fire it up, and you can share in the knowledge that it's working. So of course we want to make sure we get our power connected, and our volume pot, and We of course want to make sure we get our ribbon cable hooked up properly. Of course, I like to use the red line for pin 1. So we'll make sure the red line's on pin 1, and we'll make sure the red line is on pin 1. And let's fire it up. Okay, good test tone. Let's get past our ROM check here. Good audio there.
Sub-Zero.
Alright, good there. Alright, there's number 1. Slightly scratchy audio there, but I think a cap kit will take care of that, or reseating and cleaning the sockets will be fine, but for all intents and purposes, this one's working just fine. So happy with that, and we'll do the general maintenance on it later. Here is the second one that I did the full cap kit on that had the 3 broken legs and the bad trace down here. So we'll test this one. Here we go. Good test tone.
Sub-Zero. Sub-Zero win. Flawless victory.
Alright, 2 for 2. Let's get the last one tested. And you got to be careful with these because this will work back and forth and you'll end up breaking your legs on the amplifier again. So always be wary of that. Okay, number 3. This one's actually got the busted standoff, which is why 5 of the legs were broken on the amplifier. I need to get a new standoff, but it's working for now. So red is pin 1. Get our pot. And I think this one's slightly lower volume. I think the op amp is going out, but it still has full range and still sounds nice and loud and good, so I'm not really going to worry about it. But I think the audio is slightly less, and you'll see, or you'll hear. Yeah, see, that's slightly less. It still gets nice and loud though, so you'll see. Yeah, see, it's a bit less, but I can still. So I'll still consider it good.
Sub-Zero win. Flawless victory.
Okay, so there you go. All 3 working and good to go. First one, no problems. Board 2 and 3, fully repaired. So thanks for watching, and I hope you learned something. If you have a similar issue in the future, you know what to look for.